So, welcome everybody. It's the second one in our series of 3, and this is all about how to best grow your knowledge sharing community. So last week was all about setting the foundations, thinking very much about creating the community, and now I want to give you even more tactics and tools and templates to help you grow and expand your community. Obviously, ask me anything at any time. We're very friendly and informal, or use the chat if you don't want to interrupt, but I want to make sure obviously that you get as much out of these sessions as possible. I really appreciate you all filling in the Mentimeter poll, because that's helped me sort of focus where I'm going to spend the most time this afternoon. But in essence, we're going to have a look at your self-assessment against the building blocks, and then I'm going to give you loads of tactics and tools to easily implement. We covered a bit last time, but I've got even more to share with you this afternoon, and then discuss a little bit of the common challenges. Often it's very much, the clear objective and measuring and engagement, which is why I leave some of that stuff to the next week. But I want to make sure that we're covering all the important things as we go through. Last week we confirmed what is a knowledge sharing. I just thought I'd better recap that the words you use were sort of sharing, exchange, that sort of mutual support, solving things together, and learning and building relationships. So that's very much what we defined as a knowledge sharing community that we're building in each of our different organisations. For me, though, just a word of warning is it does take time, because it relies heavily on trust. And at the moment, we're dealing with everything being virtual and not being able to do stuff face to face. So it can be hard to build that trust and accelerate the learning between members of a community. But I like Chris Collison always referred to it like children. And he used the example of kids share toys with other kids who share their toys with them. Not that I want to make your members childlike, but it's just important that we see that in the same eyes, that adults are the same. So if we can help get the few willing ones on board, leading the way, sharing their toys, then, as I said, the social proof should follow. People tend to join communities because they have that information need, but they stay because and make it habit when there's that social need, when they've got those relationships and that trust. And that's the magic recipe that I want to help you all accelerate your programs. So last week I sent you a link to the action plan. It might be helpful to have that open again today, because as we go through each of the building blocks, you might want to jot down some notes on what you can easily implement, or however you feel comfortable. But what I want to start with is who's in our virtual room. So I know we did an introduction last week, but for everyone's benefit, Maria Laura's just joining now too. We've got a Maria, a Laura, and a Maria Laura. Can you believe that in a group? Hi, Maria Laura, are you okay? Come in. So let's start. So your name, company, the community, and then just how many years experience you have, work experience. It doesn't have to be in your community, but just to get to know a little bit more about you. Simon, not picking on the only gent in the group, but could you go first, please?
Yeah, sure. Simon Burton, Managing Director of a recruitment business in the knowledge management sector, CB Resourcing. Our community is focused on our clients, so anyone in leadership roles in our client base, which is generally people in knowledge or research management, and my years of work experience. So I guess I started working probably in 2003.
So I've got to work that out. Okay.
Yeah. Relying on your arithmetic there.
Okay, I'll try. Thank you very much, Simon. Laura from IFAD, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, everyone. Nancy just mentioned I'm from IFAD. I'm a KM analyst, and the community that I'm thinking of is the KM community of practice. It's relatively new at IFAD, as we're building, and Ilaria will explain a little bit further. We're building a large set of communities within the D Groups Foundation. And the KM community is an internal community of practice, and it includes practitioners and people that are involved in working on KM responsibilities within their organizations. We're a very decentralized organization, so it's the basis here is to unite everyone and have experiences from field offices. And that's it. I'm excited.
How many years experience, Laura, work experience do you have?
I've recently changed jobs a year and a half ago.
I mean, I don't want to signify your age or anything, but it's just how many years since graduation or you've been working? It's
almost 25 years.
Oh my goodness, thank
yes.
you. You don't look old enough. Maria Hamilton, I go to you next.
Oh, hi everybody. Sorry I wasn't there last week. Just to say, I've had 25 years plus. I don't want to say any longer than that, please. I'm starting to go grey, but my grey is quite graceful. So 25 plus years IT industry experience. Started off technical, but I've gone into a number of commercial roles. I'm currently working for an IT consultancy and social enterprise that deploys and supports IT consultants on the autistic spectrum. Really exciting role. Just started with them and helping to build an advisory practice. So community is kind of interesting right at the start on that. Prior to that, I got to know Nancy through some other work I was doing with something called Scottish Tech Army, one of the fastest growing communities. It started off in the pandemic as a result of supporting charities impacted by COVID by providing tech volunteers to provide solutions to help charities overcome the COVID challenges that they were having. So a bit of community experience around that. So that's me, here to learn.
Thanks, Maria. Maria Laura, can I ask you to go next?
Yes. Okay, sorry for before. I had some issue with my connection. So Maria Laura Corallini, Laura for short. I have 10 years experience in electronics and electronics good companies. I joined ST, which is it's a microelectronics company 4 months ago. As a digital support program manager, and the community that we are start building is a community for customer support. So mainly internal community whose member are all the teams that are globally supporting our customers. So mass market customers and one-to-one support.
Yeah, so. Great. Thank you, Maria Laura. Grace, can I ask you to go next?
Sure. Hi, my name is Grace. I work for a Christian charity. I have probably been in development for the past 7 or 8 years now. So that's kind of my background. Very much came from the field, but now a bit more officey. So we're trying to build a community of practice around church and development and trying to bring together global partners to have a conversation and share learnings around that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Grace. And last but not least, Ilaria, but can I ask you to go next?
Thank you, Nancy. Hi, everyone. I'm Ilaria Urbani, and I'm a KM consultant at IFAD. I work with Laura, and my work is to support IFAD communities of practice and networks, helping the COP owners in managing and facilitating their groups. And for this course, I pick up 1. We more or less have 10 COPs now. At the beginning of the last year, there were just 2. Now we have 11. And I pick up 1, and it is the gender network, where all the gender focal point and expert of our ongoing IFAD project, they come together and share experience and knowledge around the gender issue in projects.
Great, thank you, Ilaria. And may I ask how many years work experience you have?
Just 4. And
fantastic. So I put on the chat, I don't know if anyone saw, but does anyone want to have a guess how many years work experience we have in just this little group? Does anyone want to?
In total?
Yeah, in total.
Like I would say 100. Too much?
Anyone want to challenge that? Or 120-ish? 100, yeah, no. So my rough calculation, and it's not always the most accurate, I think we're about 107 with my experience of about 20 years. So it might felt a bit personal, sorry if I put you on the spot then. I often do this with communities to say, how many years experience have you got in the topic? And it's really nice because then people look around the room or the virtual room and go, wow, together we've got 100 years experience in this little group, and we're just 7, right? Like, it's incredible. So yeah, so Laura's 21. I think no, 20, I'm probably a little bit longer. 98 I started, yeah, so 23 now. Woo. But 20 years I say in community, because I did events in communications first, which actually is very similar, but in community and knowledge management about 20 years. Okay, so that's just a little bit of fun. You know me, I try and give you different exercises so that you can experience it and you can feel free to reuse with your group. So thank you for humouring me with that. Let's get on with having a look at the assessment. I've got 80 slides to get through, but I'll try and get through as much as possible. I think the more I get insights on what you're all thinking about and doing, the more I tailor the content so it gets longer and longer. But we'll whiz over some things and spend more time on other things, but then you have all the documents in the shared drive for you to access at any time. Okay, so looking at your results, and it looks a bit tough with all this red, but I've very loosely just picked the ones where there was a majority had signaled yes, no, or not sure. Then I picked them as red, and then amber is not sure, and then green. So as a group, you're the strongest on relationships, tools, and member experience. But what you want to focus on is strategy, content, moderation, activities, and measurement. So as I say, anything we don't have time for, measurement and engagement particularly, I've got a whole session planned for that next time. But I know some of you came yesterday, so it might be a bit of a duplication, but even more, I think, even more detail. So let's look at each one. What I'd love you to do while going through the content is to use the chat and share maybe one thing that you're going to try and do differently that you haven't tried before from what you've heard, or one thing you'd like to know more. So then when we have natural pauses, I can have a look and address those things as they come up. Obviously, if nothing comes up, don't feel you have to use the chat, but it's there to sort of capture the reflections as I go through the different things. And we will have time for a quick buddy round as well, where you can talk about one of these things with another member of the group as well. So as I mentioned last time, strategy, it's really important to have a clear vision and mission. I shared some templates about how you could work that out, some measurable objectives. Everything, if you don't know what you're doing and why you're doing it, it's really hard to measure and confirm the value. So really do help your communities articulate what it is you're trying to do, and then build that support from the stakeholders, and then resource to deliver them. Now I'm going to give you an example of, I think you asked, quite rightly last time, if I could connect this to specific examples. So I'm going to use Thermomix for a lot of them because it's both internal and external. So I think it might match quite nicely some of what you're focusing on. So you might know the kitchen appliance. It weighs, cooks, grinds, grates, all these sorts of things, all through touch screen and display. And basically they have a community of around 8 million customers across different platforms talking about the recipes and how best to use the machine. Then what we did was we wanted to harness the power of our most active members, and we created a super member program to help them leverage new knowledge, to build new recipes and things like that. So what I've done is I've filled in the strategy template and things like that in the document drive with this as an example. So that's why I'm giving you this background. And here's a snapshot of it. So if you follow the link, then you can see the full document, but they launched a super member program to grow the power of the TM community. They wanted to help create, so these are the specific things: better recipes, faster service, and stronger relationships. And how they did that, the activities they did were around content creation, ideation, testing, and advocating. So what we did then is set real clear, simple KPIs against each of those things that we could track and measure and confirm that what we were doing in the community was having its desired impact. But that's why when I was talking to you last time, it's really clear to have that goal, have how you're going to track it, and then confirm whether you're achieving that. So there's more details on that, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that, but I'll keep using this example. They had face-to-face events, but mostly it was online. That's what the picture of, and we created this toolkit. So for those of you that are creating multiple communities, this, you might like this, because we encourage them to follow a certain journey, and behind each journey was all the tools and templates that they needed for that journey. What we find is not very often are people 100% a community manager. So we want to make it as step by step and as easy as possible. And that's an example of how we did it, from building resource, showing the value at the beginning, to actually how to run the events and inspire the different members even. So for you guys then, you said that you felt a bit weaker on strategy and that you are all focusing on the poll, that you're going to do some research. There's a template again in the document about, you can ask yourself even more questions about what that could look like. So is your community strategy agreed by all your stakeholders? Is it aligned against your business objectives and corporate goals? Are you collecting data to confirm that you're meeting those goals? And are you building the right action plan to support those goals? Just gonna, I've got so many on my Zoom windows open, I'm just got to move it to make sure I can get to the arrow to turn the pages. So as I said, I've tried to streamline this to your particular needs, and I recommend the following steps if you haven't got them in place already. Is to create that draft charter, confirming what you're trying to do by answering those first questions I sent you on how to build a community. From that, you can then develop it even further into a strategy document, and then you share it with your founding members and see if they're on board to support it. Whatever you want to do, you need to get that baseline of activity to start with, and then report going forward. So to help you through that, this is the document with all the building the questions, with the example of how it's filled in. And we did quite a lot of this last time, so I'm not going to I'm going to be quicker on this one. This is a community charter template, and I think in Ilaria's document there was a couple of other examples on how to do it too, but to make sure you've got a place to confirm the roles, behaviors, the success measures.
It's pretty similar, actually.
Pardon?
It is pretty similar to the one that was in the document. So,
but what I would say is, if it's not relevant, say resources, maybe Grace is a bit tricky for you guys. You might not want to emphasize and take that box out, because the resources actually, the community leader and the other things you can't influence in your charter. So, you just flex it depending on what you need. But for me, the two important ones are the objectives and the success measures, and any activities you're going to do whilst you're doing it. So here's a strategy template. You saw this now in the template folder. I've got this filled in for Thermomix. I'd really prefer you didn't share that version around, but for you guys, you can be inspired by the words that we use and how succinct we were. So it was a real one-pager on what we're doing. And remember, we were saying the benefits need to be really clear for the members and the business, and that's why I put it specifically like that. Okay. Hopefully you're clearer now on your objectives and what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. And here's another example, maybe for internal, because we focused, I think, a lot last time on external, improving customer service, training and things like that. An example of internal ones could be to connect to, this was with British Council, connect the education community together, leverage their existing knowledge, optimize the lessons learned, and then grow expertise. So the connect was measured by the number of people that were on the distribution list. The leveraging was the number of projects or reports that were leveraged and socialized through the community, and they counted that. The follow-up was done on the optimize the lessons learned. So they wanted to know who did what after a project or asset was shared. And then they did feedback surveys every 6 months to know that the community was growing the expertise of the group. They also did polls as well, I think, but but they wanted them to confirm, and if they didn't, then they didn't carry on with that that community. So I hope you're starting to get some clearer goals yourself. If you need more examples, here's some for external. There's a lot of words on this slide. I'm just moving my windows. If you're looking for service and support, you might want to measure call deflection or the knowledge base, like the FAQs or the product details. If you're wanting insights and innovation, you might want to do market research with your communities, maybe speed up time to market or things like that. Awareness you could use, or advertising through the community. Even some like the Cookie Do, the one I've just showed you, they had a subscription model to get the quality recipes. And so they built their community to then buy a subscription through that. So there's lots of different ways to prove the value and confirm that return on investment, either internally through connecting, leveraging and growing expertise, or externally with you know, reducing time to market or any other type of marketing. Okay, so this is where I'm going to challenge you. And don't worry, you don't got to do it today, but I would love to know how you're developing your community's main objective. Do you know how you might deliver it? Do you know how you might measure it now? Wherever you are, however clear you are, I'd just like you to add it to this table. And then I can tailor if you need more help or measurement or engagement in the session next time. We just know, and it came up so much yesterday, that having that clear community objective will help determine what activities you do, and then the measures to provide that strongest foundation. So I know I keep going on about it, but it's really good to be clear on this. And I just thought if we all share it with each other, it can only help us all individually. Again, I filled it in from the Thermomix point of view, so you can see the sorts of things that might help you. So it's got the member recipes, ideation, it's got the activities, and then a bit more further details about how we do it. So it might feel a bit daunting right now, but let's go through the rest of the content, and then hopefully you can do that for me by Friday, and then I can tailor on Monday the content for the final session. Has anyone got any questions on that particular task? I think you were all getting there last week when we spoke, but I hope by actually forcing your hand, it'll be good to know. Maria, do you want to say something?
Yeah, no, just from the point of view in terms of my community, I'm right at the real sort of start of it. So, you know, I'm delivering sort of training at the moment, and from that training, I'm starting to build connections and build relationships. So I'm kind of sort of thinking, is this something that I would do down track once I've sort of, you know, developed those relationships? It's not something, I'm not sure I could do this just yet. But I don't.
It's completely up to you, because I know that you've changed. What you could try to do it for your new one, so you can crystallize what you're trying to do in the new one. But if it's easier to do the STA, you could easily do that, because you were getting just to get into that flow, and then I can say, you know, oh well, you, and remember and we should explain about Maria's community. Growth was obviously important, but when these people got into jobs, that was success factor. So actually the success of the community needed a churn, you know, because once people, it's like for Simon, for you, if you don't want everyone to be out of work to have a strong community, you want them to be in good roles and positions and things like that. So I think just think about the questions and relate it either to your current or past one, or past. just for the exercise, really.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's
make
brilliant.
it relatable as possible.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Everyone else okay? I'm just checking the chat. As I say, it's not to catch you out or anything. It was just to sort of focus the mind. And this is kind of a thing that I would do individually, but I just thought it would be good to do as a group, because then we can see how we're all learning and adapting to the content that we're going through. But I'll come on to, we can always come back to that if there's any questions. So growth. Many of us are at the early stages of our community, so we wanted to learn more about growth. And we explained last time that it's not just about scale, it's about growing engagement, relationships, and how we maximize this is to measure every step of the journey and make sure in the limited time we've got, we're focusing on the right things. This is one I made earlier. This is the optimized sort of member journey of the Thermomix community. So it's got, you know, really high automation in here too, but you can sort of see that to get someone from being a lurker and just coming in for information to then becoming an advocate and becoming that super member, and all the different tasks that they could get involved with along the way. I'll be honest, it's not as streamlined and as slick as it looks on this slide, but it's very much their intention to handhold people throughout their journey, because their priority is loyalty. Their machines are a lot of money and they want people to stay and buy other products and stay, you know, they've got them to buy the product in the beginning and they want them to stay for lifetime. So they really focus on this hand-holding of the community. But what we want to do is to make our own journey, and it could be just 2 or 3 steps, from outreach to a direct invitation for a new member, to welcoming a new member and getting them engaged on the platform or a call or whatever activities that we're doing. So there's some different options here for direct growth. We might have a mailing list and we want to send people direct invitations to come, or if we're external, we might want to do some promotion. Whatever we want to do at the beginning, I would do it really small and select and make sure that we're building the right behaviours in the group before going to, you know, big bang launches. But so for today, I'm going to focus on direct growth because I think that's the most focus for you guys. As much as possible, we want to keep it short and we want to keep it as specific as possible. Ideally, we've done our a bit of analysis and we've worked out who those founding members should be, maybe the ones that have been most active in past events, say Simon for You, or community expert people for the IFAD ladies. Maybe there's people that already show willing or appetite for these sorts of things. And then you want to invite them, remember, for that conversation. You want to say, look, we've got this idea, we want to talk to you about it, and we would love you to make some time for that first call or that interview. We want to measure if they respond quickly. If we never hear from them again, you know, we might not want to, it might show that they're not that interested. But ideally, we want to close it with some sort of commitment and get them to do that. So again, in the folder, I put a couple of templates, but I've just lifted one here. This again was the recipe community. They were already quite active and we wanted to talk to them about a new program we were running. So we were very personal and we said, we've seen you've done this, thank you, and we'd like you to be involved. Are you interested? For new communities, everyone feels this step is, you know, really takes a lot of time because it's so personal, but honestly, you can build such strong relationships with this first group. That personal welcome before the survey or the interview can really help. From that, as I said, I've used the example from a newsletter list. You might want to identify the ones that click it the most open. Then you do their outreach, have that interview call, and maybe invite them to the news site for some feedback. As much as you can, if you can have something that will connect them on a webinar or a call. I mean, in the past, that might have been face-to-face, then it would be really good to start bringing those other founding members together. I think there's some more documents to support each of those steps. And I think, yeah, I don't know why that's so blurry. You've got these questions though, they're the interview questions. So these are the ones I said to you, trying to find out what they want to talk about, which will help your content plan, trying to find out what their biggest challenges are, so that we can best tailor the activities to their specific needs. If at first the audience that you interview aren't showing that they're the most interested, or they're maybe too distracted with other things, you know, you just keep going until you've got a core group of people to start with. Everyone has different priorities and pressures, and it might, you know, might take a bit of time to cement the right founding members. once we've got that group and we're facilitating them to be part of something, then we can start seeing sort of returning visits to a site or to an event. Maybe we can even ask them to participate next time. So I've got another few steps on growth on sort of when they first come to the platform, which I know, Grace, you particularly were interested in. How do you keep them coming back and sustaining sort of quality contributions? So the first flow chart was the outreach and meeting new members and getting them on board. This flow is more about getting them to actually participate on a platform. So for example, you invite them to the platform, like what we've done on Slack. I've did a public and a private message to some of you. If they contributed, I went back with a thank you. If they didn't, maybe I did a little reminder. And it just helps people through that first experience, especially with people that they don't know. If they do something or you need something help, you can tag them and mention them. If they're contributing a lot, you could highlight or showcase them. Or if they don't, you could ask them, why isn't it relevant? All in all, you want to help them through these stages as personally as possible in the time that you have available. I'll come to your question in a second, Maria. So my recommended growth steps would be to start with that personal invitation or have that interview, and then welcome them to the community, publicly welcome them to if they start participating, and thank them for their contributions, and then measure each of those steps. So if you send 10 outreach emails and you get 4 back, and then you might tailor the email and you get 10 out of 10 back, you know, you might then work out what's the best way to outreach your particular audience. Okay. I'll pause for a second and I will come to your question, Maria. Do keep sharing in the chat anything that you want to ask, or anything you're going to do differently on what you've just heard. So how many do you need for superfans? Well, how many, Maria, do you need to have in a community before you have superfans? Or explain the question.
Yeah, no, it was just in terms of how, you know, how many do you need in that sort of core group first to get it going, in terms of your super fans engaged to start sort of building.
So for me, I would say interview wise for founding members 10 to 20, right. Because it's that personal. You want to have enough people on the platform that you can tag or content, not all 10. So I would probably outreach 20 and then hope you'll get some numbers. If you only got 5, then I would keep going until you get to between 10 and 20. Right. I misunderstood the question. Often the founding members, your highly engaged people or people you've got the strongest relationships, turn into your super members because they're in it from the beginning and they steer it, and they're just so passionately involved. So super fans could be any number. That's what I was going to say. I wouldn't. You can have, not all communities are going to be 8 million. They have 200 super fans. But I mean, I know a lot of communities that have a membership of 100 and have 20 super fans. So there's not like I would say, depending on your objective, have a core audience that are going to help you with volunteering and supporting you on the community activities.
Yeah, so core being 10 to 20, and then from that, your super fans are any number. Yeah, can be from that. Yeah, that's what I meant.
And if it gets too big, and then we were talking about this last time with them, you could have some subgroups and then diverse and, you know, divide and conquer. So you can have smaller groups. Our community has been successful because we do not trust. Yeah, Chatham House Rules. How do we translate that into a portal-based community? Maybe we shouldn't. It's okay as it is, but yeah, do you know what? A lot of people are struggling with this at the moment because they feel like what's written down is then, you know, they're in print forever. 2 groups I know have used the platform for putting topics that they want to talk about, and then they're voting going, yes, we really want to talk about gender equality issues, but they don't want to use the platform to talk about that. And then they've gone off and had so people have identified who wants to be in that offline conversation, and they've created it like that. Other groups I know have created private groups for those specific conversation and agreed between themselves what had to be discussed internally. I don't, kind of defeats the community essence of sharing. But, you know, if it gets a group together to connect and share and discuss things that are relevant to them, do what they feel comfortable. As I say, I'm very aware that not everyone wants to share everything. And then they don't ask for help. So then it reduces the impact. Does that help, Simon?
Yeah, definitely. I hadn't thought about it like that, but yeah, I think depending on the type of organization, people are worried about things being quoted out of context or whatever. So it's harder to get them to write something or be on a video or whatever. And even, you know, if the wrong type of person's there, they're a bit God, I'm making them sound way more secretive than they are, but just people are sensitive to these things, and to get a really good open discussion that's useful. We've always worked to that kind of setup, and it was easier in person, but, you know, people are very like, you know, they're not recorded, are they? So I've always sort of thought, how do we then take that to a sort of online platform that would actually have any content in it of use if they don't want to contribute in that way? But I hadn't thought about kind of framing the topic. And yeah,
and I've seen people do it with a complete anonymous, so they'll have like an anonymous room and you can go in incognito. I mean, I don't know your platform choices, but, you know, you can go and discuss and no one knows who you are. I've also known that people promote conversations through the community manager so that they never have to look like the one asking for help. So then everyone can share their different experiences, but no one needs to be singled out for having that problem. I would find out what they feel most comfortable with, and if it's, and then, yeah, agree with them what process might work.
Great, thanks very much.
No worries. And how do we help experts become super fans with the understanding they have a busy schedule? Yeah, how do you get volunteers? Do you know what, Grace? If they're keen and they're getting value from it, then they will participate. So for me, find out what their motivations are. Is it kudos? Is it their, you know, to get expertise or social recognition? And if you can help elevate and meet their motivations, then by asking them to contribute. So for example, speakers, you know, or writing assets, you know, if they're going to get kudos for contributing to these sorts of things or facilitating something, you know, just offer them back. If they're not sure, because this is what happens, is they go, oh, I don't need anything, you know, I'll just do it, but then they don't turn up and they don't commit to anything. Then I would really find out, going, you know, what would make this at the top of your priority list? Oh, well, I've got my annual review, and it'd be really good if my boss knew that I've participated in this forum. Could you send them a note afterwards? Or, I mean, I guess for you, it's, you don't know all these people, so it's, you know, how do you know what each of their motivations are? I'd probably maybe ask them in your survey what would make you put this at the top of the list, or what would stop you coming or participating, and find out maybe in a general way. Does that help? They need to see the value for them to give up their time and their knowledge. So it needs to connect to something that means something to them. Thanks, Grace. Right, content. Loads. So content, as I said, just needs to be about the community, less about you creating resources. You want, ideally, your members to create that, but you want to celebrate that. So, you know, spotlighting those super members that have contributed lots, spotlighting people that go out of their way to help each other. That's where you get, and you can support their motivations. So the tips here are highlighting members who create great content, asking provocative or questions, or even asking your super members to ask those questions, so that there's lots of regular content. Utilizing tools or channels that already exist. So if there's already a internal news in your internal organizations or customer newsletters, maybe you can explain or work with your corporate comms to build into existing channels, and then explain to them what's so unique and special about your community, and what they might have missed by not coming to that community. And I've got an example, so some of you are obviously found me and my work through the Knowledge and Community Network. We always do sort of highlights of what happened at the webinar, even if people didn't come, maybe some takeaway actions or links to resources, and there's an example. So even if you can't go to every event, you're getting a flavour of what's going on, and in a simple and easy way. So it's less about what I've been doing, more about what the community are discussing and sharing. What you want to do is get into some regular habits, but it's got to be easy and achievable for you. So I've put an example here that maybe every Monday you do a quick summary. That could be once a month. I'm choosing a week as an example. I know some of you don't have the same freedom to do that. And I'd write the post the week before ready for the week ahead. So I put on here that Wednesdays you prepare the posts. And then you do things like direct messages to the new members. Maybe you ask them to do a poll. I don't know how you found the poll on the Slack channel, but I get a lot of feedback that people find doing a poll first sort of is a nice, comfortable way in to posting in a community. And then they feel more comfortable then to like and then to comment or reply. So giving as you're having new members join every week, you might want to get into a regular habit of a poll or a question on a Thursday. Obviously, if there's loads of organic stuff, then you can just thank people, tag people to join into those conversations, and then maybe do a new member welcome every Friday. So here, the main things for community content were the community highlights and the new member welcome, and everything else is a bit more flexible. But wherever possible, you want to be checking your community every working day, and even block out a time in your diary to check in. I find, blocking out half an hour after lunch or something to check in, respond, to tag, a really good habit to get into. So no one's waiting for longer than 24 hours for a reply, and it might steer what you're working on accordingly. You don't want to saturate, if it's a quiet community, you don't want to saturate it with just your content, but you do need to show at least for a few weeks, 3 months even, to sort of build that habit and consistency that what's coming up. So with whatever activities you're doing, I would get into a regular habit of doing a follow-up email, maybe follow up to your events, thanking the speakers, particularly for their contributions, confirming maybe what members were attending or participation, so they feel like they're part of something that's growing, and then always invite feedback. Yesterday, someone mentioned that surveys are, getting saturated by surveys. A really simple way is to have a feedback thread in your community, and then in your highlights, you link to that, so people are prompted to add their feedback on the forum, perhaps in whatever regular thing that you do. Okay, let's pause for a second. Is there any other questions, reflections on strategy, content, or growth? Is there one thing you're going to do differently now, or one thing you'd like to know a little more on? No, I'm going to keep going just because we've got still quite a lot to get through. But do keep asking. Moderation. So this is where we said we want to promote proactive activity. We want to bring people into different conversations so that people feel really safe and comfortable to engage. The good behaviours are like responding in 24 hours, maybe asking a clarifying question or two. And I put a document in the templates to say how to ask some really interesting questions, or you never want to ask a question that can be just answered yes or no. You want an open question that can create some sort of dialogue. So that there's different tricks on how best to do that. And let me go through. Ideally, you want to work at the beginning. It's a lot of hand holding, but ideally you want to get to a stage where you're this invisible conductor, and that you may be tagging people behind the scenes and saying, have you seen this post on X? Can you reply to it? I know you've got expertise. And that's where I was saying to your question, Maria, about founding members, you want a broad audience of people that you've got to know that you can bring in as you need them. And that's why those interviews and things are really helpful. Other ideas are the daily tasks. So I was starting to talk about that in the content plan, is you want to visit every day. You want to get into a really good habit of liking posts so that people feel like they're listened to. If a post doesn't have a reply, then you want to start tagging members either publicly or privately so that they get the responses. As we said, we don't want to put something on there and no one's read it or found it useful. Thank all members if they've started a topic or gone out of their way. People love that personal recognition. And if they've just joined, as I say, it's really, and that's why I did the round the table at the beginning of this call. If you just joined a group that's already established, it can feel a bit awkward. So the more you can make people feel welcome online is important to do as much as possible. I'll come to your question in a second, Simon. So moderation is all about highlighting and promoting the most popular discussions, having a plan where you can maybe ask a proactive question once a week or something, but it's got to be relevant. It's got to be related to what your audience needs, what they need help on. As I said, it's important to have some open questions. What do you think about that? How much do you spend on, or hypothetical, what would you do? Hypothetical is good, Simon, particularly for you, what would you do if this situation arose in your company? You don't have to say specifically that's going on now, but it's highly likely that it could happen. And as I say, there's a big list here, about 20, I think, of conversation starters that I've used and created in the past. So feel free to pick a couple that work for you and rotate them and see which ones work for your audience. Wherever you can, you want, no, I'm not going to do this one. Yeah, this, the rotation should be something like you ask, you share something, you offer support, and you really care. So it's kind of like, it's really bad in communities that people are just promoting. You want to share something useful. You want to share, ask for help, be open to say, that we need help. If someone is struggling or you hear or something, you want to show that you're caring and that you're listening, and that ongoing support sort of continues. There's quite a formal plan here with sort of developing community tone, guidelines, calendars, calls to action, emails, and all that sort of thing. But I broke it down just into ask, share, support, and care, because I'm really conscious of not to give you too many things to do, and to actually just build something that's supportive for your community. So here, there's a calendar again in the link where you can do moderation, content, and engagement, and sort of plan it out. And actually, maybe you only have one of those things in one of the weeks for your community, but over the month that you've got a balance of content, something that's an activity, and a sort of supporting conversation, or if you want a conversation, ask a question. So I do this a lot in the beginning myself, and then I work with the founding members to ask a question once a week as well, and that really helps sort of balance it being always the communities manager's voice. There we go. So whatever you do goes back to your member research. What are the topics that they want to talk about? What's going to be interesting? And then create a plan around it. Balance it with questions, polls, things that people feel less barrier to sort of contribute to them. Here's some examples. What are you working on? That is one of the questions I come back to all the time in communities. People suddenly feel comfortable to go, what am I working on a Monday morning? Oh, I've got all this to do. And, they don't stop. If you're doing those activities or those Q&As and you want to know what happened, what have you actioned or what have you done differently? Other favorite one, what is the biggest challenge of the week? And then before an event, what would you like to know? What questions could you invite? beforehand, so people are sort of thinking about the knowledge activities that you're doing. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second as I do know I'm going through it at a speed of knots. So Simon, I think I need to put some more context around what we're doing, as it's been so informal and we're probably missing a lot of value that we could create. Okay, so yeah, be more specific about what you're focusing on and why.
Yeah, sorry, when you were asking about our reflections of what we'll do earlier, that was just my comment.
Okay, yeah. People feel that, and again, I'm not speaking for you, but you know, that too much rigor sort of hinders the group. But I think just keep clarifying that what you're doing is adding value, and what to focus on in the next few months is really helpful. And I just don't want to make assumptions, really, because that's when they can become unstuck, or habits that it's harder to break but no longer adding value. It's really unfair for me to say this, but people do newsletters or do events, and you know, they take a lot of time to put together, and they're not necessarily adding the same value as facilitating a small discussion around a topic that was really relevant to that audience. So I just try and get people to think about that and not get into too many heavy resource draining activities. Saying that, we're now looking at activities and events. So we want that sociability. Remember, we're all about building relationships. So we want to create that opportunity where they can chat and connect on a particular topic. So whatever you do a few things and do them what's right and relevant for your audience, base them on your members' needs, and make sure you're enabling them to sort of discuss their common challenges. So I'm going to get you to go into a body with someone else in the room in a second, and then you can talk about your particular challenges or things that you've learned. But the sort of things you could do is live Q&A, live forum discussions, expert member interviews, do new member orientation. Maria, you got into a really good habit of doing that, didn't you, with the STA, by making sure within the first week, was it, they had a chance to meet some other people?
Yeah. So we ran a sort of induction for all our new members, and from that we were able to sort of help signpost them or connect them into, you know, relevant areas within the Scottish Tech Army that was of relevant interest to them. Yeah.
And that happened like within the week of signing up, and it's resource
so
intensive, but you saw the difference, didn't you?
Yeah, so we had an introduction channel that we sort of monitored, and I had somebody that was a community. So we had some community hosts whose role was to sort of, you know, just help people find their way within the community, and also identify their areas of interest and where they're interested to support the organisation. And from that, then signpost them, connect them up to somebody. Invariably, we just try and encourage that sort of connection that they could then, it's like going to a party, isn't it? And then you chat to somebody comes in, and then you connect them, and then you walk away, you know, where they've made that connection. So it's very much sort of joining the dots and allowing them to sort of continue on that journey.
But without that actual physical event, if it was just an email, or it just wouldn't have had the same impact, would it?
Yeah,
So it's the conversations, as I always say.
Yeah, what we found is, you know, we had a lot of automation. We were trying to, you know, they were keen to sort of automate as much as you could, in terms of we sent out automated emails. So as soon as somebody came in, there was an automated email that sort of, it was a chatbot thing on Slack that enabled them to sort of find the links to information. But it wasn't actually until they came to the orientation that people actually connect and do things. And I do think, you know, even with myself, when I was trying to find people to help me, I would spend a lot, you know, I'd arrange a Zoom call with them, because all of this was done online. I'd arrange a Zoom call and find out about them and spend time, build the relationship. And that pays dividends, because you end up, you know, if they want to help, that, you know, that they'll start helping, and then, you know, really sort of supporting you in that way. But yeah, spending time, I think, first of all, really pays dividends in terms of, you know, how they can support you.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. So the first sort of community activities you could do is, it's like Maria had read my slide, set up an opportunity to meet with champions or volunteers and see what they could get involved with. Create a space for them to maybe share some things or to buddy up with other people, and then have some small group discussions if it's right and relevant. Whatever you try, review it in 6 months' time, and make sure it's still adding value, because you can mix it up as much as you want. So in your member reset, you're getting familiar now, is find out what they'd like to do, what they've got appetite for, what they've got time for, and then what would be the most relevant to meet their needs, and then pilot it so that they get an opportunity to have some smaller sessions and review how they're working afterwards. Okay, relationships. That's what we're all trying to enable to happen. It's really difficult for us to be everywhere all of the time. What we can do is foster relationships with our most influential members, and then that helps us sort of be everywhere and hear what's going on and make sure that we're responding to the ever-changing needs. You all said, you know, that this is probably your areas of strength, so I won't spend too much time on here, but I would emphasize, you know, have you identified who your top contributing members are if you're already existing? Is there appetite for these members to do a bit more? And if not, then start fostering relationships with those groups so that they can best support you and the other communities. Whatever you do, try and be that influential member and build relationships with those influential members. And it all comes down to sort of that likability, you know, be genuine, be authentic. Everyone always asks me, can you be a community manager if you don't have any subject matter expert? I always think it's hard, but you need to have empathy. So you need to have some sort of understanding and experience of that group. I think to be completely, you don't have to be an expert, but you need to have some understanding, experience and empathy for the topic. Because you want to I'll give reciprocity. So you want to do, if they do something nice, you want to be thank them, you want to be authentic in that. And if you don't know anything about the topic, it's really hard to do that authentically. And then there's different tactics. Maybe you don't need to do all of these all at the same time, but with new members, you want to provide that warm welcome. With active members, you want to thank them and highlight their great contributions. If it's expertise, you want to link them together so that people can find them and they can provide support to other people. So wherever you can, linking to content, and there's some phrases here. This came up before. I mean, it's so simple, but it makes a real connection between different content or people. Maybe providing insight on what's coming up next, or tag an expert so that they can help answer your questions. One thing that you could do, like I was saying earlier, is challenge yourself once a day to give out likes or to ask a question or to demonstrate one of these things so that you feel it becomes more of a habit, and you'll find, I said about social proof, others will follow as well. So again, if you've got gamification, I know we've all got different platforms. People that give kudos here on giffgaff get loads, get points. People that have nominated for the best answers get points, and that even turns into money. Now, I don't expect you all to have a platform like giffgaff, but you might want to have a look at some of these external ones and see how you might want to do it. In its simplest form, it could be just highlighting a member for who's answered the most questions. It could be who asked the most questions. You can do that manually quite simply without having a sophisticated platform, but you want to stimulate that positive quality behavior. So I hope that's given you some food for thought. I've added one more in here on internals. Just don't forget who you need to build relationships with internally. They need to support you and your community. So do give them updates, give them information on what you're working on, so that they can best support you and your community.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't know already, work out who you should have relationships with, where they are on the member research, how they might best support you, and then build it into the plan on how you're going to build relationships with them and get them on board. Ideally, whatever you do, make them part of the journey and the outcome. So that tagging, thanking them, making sure that they feel valued for their contributions is really important. There's nothing worse, is it, than filling in a survey and you never know what happens to it, what happened next, or anything like that. So follow up is key there.
Yeah.
Okay, now we've lost Maria Laura, haven't we? And what I wanted to do now is to give you a few minutes in a room with someone that you haven't had a chance to meet. So I wonder if, Maria, I'm going to put you in a room with Laura and Simon. So you're going to be in a room of 3. So you're going to have to be really, really swift. Yeah, I think that will work. Okay, so 6 minutes, guys. I'd love you to, so in the group of 3, 2 minutes each, share either one thing that you're going to do differently or one thing you need help on. The group of 3 will need to agree who's going to say listen intently, because I'd like you to share back in when we come back what you heard the others. So for example, Maria could say what Simon said, Simon could say what Laura said, and Laura could say what Maria said. And then Grace and Ilaria, you've got a bit more time and you can talk. So it's a bit of a fast experience, but I wanted you to experience this and see what it's like, and yeah, give me feedback afterwards. Has anyone got any questions on that as a process? It's like speed dating in breakout rooms.
Oh my God, right, brain.
So two minutes each. I'm going to open the rooms up and I'll see you in 6. You get 6 minutes and then you get a wrap up minute as well. So I'll see you shortly. Any problems, come back. Should go into your rooms now. Does that work? There you go. Oh, Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome
Oh,
back,
hi.
everybody. Okay, how was that? Ilaria and Grace, would you like to share what the other, just one short thing, what you
Yeah,
heard
we
in the
started speaking about our challenges because we have some similar challenges. So just at the very minute, the last one, we started replying to your question because before we were speaking about always about cops as well. So the challenge for Grace and what she wants to know a little more. I don't know if I have to explain mine or what Grace told me.
just what Grace told you, as succinct as you possibly can, because we're running out of time.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. So how to create subgroup, because they have one big community, very big, and in order to revive this community a bit more, she would like to create a subgroup and maybe divide for thematics or areas. So she wanted to know how to create smaller community within a bigger one.
Brilliant, thank you.
Where
And Grace, what did Ilaria?
Yeah, so she said that one thing that she will implement is strategy. They have strategy for some of the subgroups, but not all of them. So it's a bit confusing because they're not sure what some of the goals are for these communities. They just come and chat. So this is one thing that they'll be able to implement so that every group has a target and a goal and they can track with it.
Brilliant, thank you. And I know you could have all had longer, and I'm sorry for being there, but do connect if you want to carry on. Obviously, connect with each other. Maria, Laura, and Simon, who wants to go first and just say what you learned from the other?
Yeah, it was kind of intense for us. My brain doesn't work that fast, but anyway, so I've just written up. With Simon, he sort of found, by going online, there's just more opportunity to engage with more members. Whereas before it was more face-to-face. And so what he wants to do differently is have more sort of formalization around how he sort of builds that sort of engagement now. And in terms, if you'd like to do more in terms of getting more external insight into his programs and including members. With Laura, hang
on. I need Simon to explain Laura's because you need to each share.
Go on then.
If that's all right.
Yeah. So Laura, initially, one of her things is focusing much more initially on quality over quantity in terms of interactions, but also she was looking for ideas and going to build much more innovative facilitation in to build interaction. So looking at bringing lots of ideas like that into it. So probably stuff like this, I should imagine.
Thanks, Simon. And then Laura, do you have a couple of things from what Maria said? Oh, I think we lost you.
Maria was mostly focusing on getting from her members. I think that's one area that she'd like to do a lot more differently. And she would, in terms of knowing more, she would like to know more on how to follow up, in terms to bring it more at the long term and not have plans that could bring you into a perspective where it could actually be sustainable in the long term, and to have more engagement as well.
And we'll cover more on facilitation and engagement next time as well, because I know I've done it quite rushed today. Thank you for doing that. I know it was really fast, and I'm sorry, you were all supposed to be in pairs, but sadly Maria Laura had to disappear, so that's why it made it a bit more intense. But what I wanted to emphasize is that it sounds like you all had some really good conversations in a really short, rapid way, and actually it's really easy to do, and you could do that with your communities. I've known communities do this to volunteer, and then they just have a call when they want, maybe before the next big call, and you can just do like the coffee trials with each other, or do it in a breakout room. The other trick there was listening. So obviously you could all say your own news, but you had to say so you makes you listen more intently. And in a virtual situation, we're so easily distracted by everything else. Having that as a task just makes you sort of cement it. So feel free to try any of these things which are right and relevant for your audience, but hopefully by experiencing it, that's what I'm always going on about, that it's not as scary or as intimidating as it might sound on paper. And as I say, everyone's usually in it to learn something, so they're coming at all these conversations with a real open mind as well. So thank you all for doing that. So I've got a few more bits to do before we finish. And I answered your question, Laura, in the chat about tagging, and I gave you some options that if it's the quiet ones, find out what's the barrier is. I knew a group that culturally, because they were never asked to contribute either in an online event or face-to-face, that they didn't come forward. So when I knew that, I could politely ask them. And then if it's the same ones offering help and not asking for help, then I sort of gave them a gentle reminder that it's something to learn and something to share, and works best with these groups. If you have really noisy, difficult members, which you might do, I would try and find them a role, because usually they're quite, if they're active, it may be that they welcome all new members, or they could be the person that likes, you might find that their motivation is exposure, and they would love, to be part of a role. So they could ask the question of what topics you want to discuss, and then they feel much more part of it. Okay, so let's go on to, before we finish. So resources, really important that we have clear, dedicated resources. I know for many of you it's an add-on to lots of other roles, but if you can be really specific how much time you can allocate to managing a community, or your community managers have, then it'll obviously be a lot more successful. If you can't carve it in their job description specifically, then you're always on borrowed time, aren't you? So you want to make sure that you can secure it in your role. And if not, build a business case on why this needs this dedicated resource, because you're building trust, relationships, and you want to generate value from the exchanges that go on. We talked a little bit about structure last time, and I thought this might be helpful. Now, this is the dream, right? So this is not where I know a lot of you are, but ideally you have this community sponsor, the highest person in your organization, who's interested in the topic, that can be that visible leader or supporter that you check in time to time, share your results with, and make sure that, it is what the business wants. Then you might have a community owner or leader, which is like a senior person, maybe leading the agenda, maybe most comfortable facilitating some of the discussions. And then you might need a manager or facilitator, maybe to do more of the running of the event. It really depends how you want to carve this up, and you might not need both, but this is sort of ideal circumstances. It always worked well when I had a subject matter expert as the leader or manager, but then a more junior person as an administrator, not to be rude, but they were more comfortable with the technology, setting up the forums and tagging and those sorts of things. And together it was a really nice sort of two-way mentoring person on that. Your volunteers, your champions, they're your highly engaged members, maybe your founding members. I think the most important thing is one person is not enough, and you should share out these responsibilities. People move on, people have they get called away. And, if you're clear you want your community to run for the foreseeable future, you need a mixture of people helping you to run it. Obviously, it doesn't have to be all the same amount of time, but having that steering group, having that support, can only make your community stronger. And as I say, that's ideal scenario. So the business case, if you don't have that dedicated resource already, if you don't have a supporting team, then go out and find some people that can help support you, even in the part-time, ad hoc capacity, and then create a plan. So, we're going to do Grace's new community, sub-communities, and we're going to try it for 6 months on this resource, and then we'll review it. So everyone feels that, if one person was overwhelmed and it doesn't work, that they know they've got a chance to review it with the key people involved. Okay. Member experience, we have less influence on this, but as I said last time, it's about every interaction. So you might have those automated emails, you might have the system emails that you can tailor and make them as personalized as possible. Signposting as much as you can to resources, FAQs, those little guides like we talked about, so people can self-serve as and when they need it. Ideally, obviously, if we had amazing platforms all the time, we'd be looking at what we can do to automate and push more notifications as much as possible. Notifications probably so often can be a barrier to community. So either people don't turn them on and they never hear that there's anything new, or they're saturated and they feel that, you know, they just ignore them. So some guidance or some hand holding through setting up notifications can be such, you know, such a valid time. So like Maria was saying, in the new member welcome, it might be something you want to really earmark to get the most out of the platform. And you can you know, you can notify on different platforms, you can be notified on particular topics or channels or all sorts of things. So help them to self-select the right notifications for them. This was just a SharePoint site. I think I flashed it up before, but I wanted to show that the community designed what the core menu should look like. They then co-created the resources that went behind it, and they drove that consistency for it to evolve over time. So the discussion forums were in here. The things that had been asked for help were sort of cemented in the help section. More concrete resources were created here. Training was there. So it wasn't a big budget or anything. They just did some icons that they all agreed with, and that helped give that consistency just on SharePoint. Whatever it is, make it easy for them. Cheat sheets, there's a lot that already exist online. I mean, for me, they're always overwhelming. Maybe you pick 4 or 5 things that you want people to use, and you know, give them those so your community have it as easy as possible. Okay, so if I didn't mean to do that. If you're at a stage and you're looking at a new platform, or you're looking at how to optimize your current platforms, this is something you could do really easily with your volunteers or your community and say, look, if what we got, is it working? Is it not? What could we change? And even if you can't change all the ideas that come up, by asking people for feedback, you're probably going to get more buy-in from using the platform. I've done things like this with sort of little treasure hunts, like pretend to be a new member, go and find what it's like, you know, when you first come in. It might be obvious for where you go, but it's not to new members. So work with your audience and make sure whatever you create is right and relevant for them. And then review it, you know, as it evolves over time. There's some amazing communities that are on some really archaic platforms, but they've got the structure there, and they signpost new members on how to navigate that structure, and it doesn't matter that it looks horrendous, that the people are getting value from the platform. So just think about how people are using and what they need to find, and make it as easy as for them as possible. KM tools. So Simon says, I'm stuck between using messaging platform like Guild and a full content platform like Zapnita. There are benefits for both, but it would mean to do things very differently. So yeah, answer to my own question, your founding members at your research, you could ask them what would they prefer. Maybe for security, a messaging platform isn't enough, and they would like more secure areas to discuss things, but maybe they don't know what they don't have or what they need, and maybe you don't even be specific on the platform. Find out what they want to do, and then you evaluate the platform to meet their needs. I mean, the Facebook, the sort of activity feed generation are so familiar with that, and everyone says they want it, but actually for community and relationship building, that's just for comms, and actually they do still want the forums, or they want the private areas to discuss. So I mean, I'm not going to say what's right or wrong, just find the things that work best for your before communities. Yeah, webinar interactions, we've done some of those. Hopefully you've experienced some of them, but I'm going to do that specifically next time. I've got a guide on that. So obvious, you guys felt very confident in this area. Pick the knowledge sharing tools that are relevant for your community. Don't do too many, and make sure that whatever you co-create is of value, and really confirm that value back to your group. Discuss what tools would be most appropriate. and invite volunteers to help you create those tools. So if you're doing a member directory, get people to say what columns do they want in that directory, what sort of bits of information do they want. If they want to do buddying like we've done, what would be the criteria or the questions that you would steer the buddies conversations to do. And then make sure whatever you do, you pilot, do it 2 or 3 times and find out what worked, what didn't, and whether you should continue. So we're really nearly out of time, and I'm sorry. Measurement and benefits. You know what? Because a lot of you came yesterday, and we're going to have more time on measurements next time. I'm just going to rattle through this because we are out of time. But we'll start on measurements when we meet next week. So you also asked for some other resources. So at the back of the presentation, there's lots of links to Community Roundtable, to APQC or to Feverbee. There's loads of resources available out there. So I'm trying not to overwhelm you, even though I do a 90-deck slide, but there's as you grow and after the course, you can come back and these links and find more resources out there. I don't think we've got time. Got time for common challenges, but most common is that unavailability of time. People think that that it's not possible, it's not a priority. Why do they bother? You know, why should I even turn up? And that's why I go back to that member research. If you know what it is that there is a pain point or a challenge, then suddenly it will be made a priority. So if you've got a mass exodus of people turning up, you do your research and find out what's going to be relevant for them. And maybe it's not the same for everyone all the time, but you can do a rotation of topics to make it as relevant as possible. Whatever you do, check the impact. Make sure you know what's working, what's not working. And even on scale, like if you could have some, I'm thinking of Simon's group here, you know, 4 or 5 people, it doesn't have to be 40 or 50 people, but if they're all getting value and they're confirming that, then I think we get all bogged down with scale. And if it's meeting the objectives in small roundtable discussions, then we shouldn't worry that we're not huge, which sometimes is all people look at. Whatever you do, keep it simple, keep it achievable, and keep going back to your research and develop the right activities and make it as value-adding, as fun as possible, which I'm trying to emulate in these 90 minutes. So a lot was covered there. You've got time to digest with the slides, and you can come back next time with any questions, reflections, or comments, or use the Slack at any time to make further points. What I want to emphasize, I think it will help us get the most out of our time together if we could have a go at doing these community objectives, activities and measures. No one's going to share them in your organization. They're literally just between us as a group, but it will just help us understand and maybe succinctly see if we're focusing on the right things. So, I think it's just great if I can see the measures that are going against your objectives. So I'll put that in the Slack channel, and if you could do that by Friday, it just gives me a chance on Monday to tailor the content ready for the Tuesday. Right, sorry guys, is that, I'm sure we all need to go now. Was there any further questions, reflections in a fast and furious afternoon? You're all still smiling, just.
Yeah, and that went really fast.
Because I talk really fast.
No, it went really, really fast. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, really good stuff. So yeah, it's just sort of taking the time to go through it and sort of, you know, starting to put the frameworks in place.
I always put too much in, but you know, everyone's at a different situation, everyone's at a different thing, but hopefully between all of them that you have what you need to take forward. And then in the other bits where it's links, then you can go back to it at the time when you next need it. And then we have the one-to-one after the last webinar where we can really be tailored to your specific thing. So you can really plan any questions you might not have wanted to share in the group. And I can help you through that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention, participation, and I'll see you next Tuesday for our final
Okay,
session.
bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.